Hi, I'm Gabriele Angelini, and I'm here to talk about indigenous hunting and fishing. Now, indigenous hunting and fishing has obviously grown, changed, and actually, unfortunately, even shrank since European colonizers came to Canada. Now, before, indigenous people used to hunt and fish for spiritual and material needs. And when European colonizers came, they seen these different strategies and were shocked because Europeans had metals to make guns and bullets. So seeing these so much different strategies shocked them so much that they gave the indigenous people a demeaning title that was savages. They called them savages. So from this point on, indigenous hunting and fishing would be changed to what it is today. Today, indigenous hunting and fishing is a lot different because the indigenous people have to abide by the treaties. The three main treaties of northeastern Ontario are the Robinson, the Huron, and the Robinson-Huron. These treaties are basically to set boundaries for indigenous hunting and fishing on separate parts of the land. So certain indigenous groups cannot hunt on other indigenous groups' land unless they have a shipman's letter. But the way that they can avoid trouble for hunting on indigenous land is by having their status card on them at all times. So a conservation officer stops them and they can show them that and then no more trouble. So this is obviously one of the bigger changes to indigenous hunting and fishing because they went from having all this land that they could hunt on and now have to be almost caged in like an animal on this one area where they can't go away from. They can't go off of because then it's illegal. But, so, now I want to talk about how hunting and fishing at night is not an automatic law. Right, and a law as well. Now, hunting and fishing at night, it can be very dangerous because it's dark, can't see much, stray bullets can hit the wrong animal or even a person for that matter, and it can cause a lot of problems that way. It is one of the reasons that the Manitoba Premier has banned hunting and fishing at night permanently, no exceptions, whereas Ontario government has said if an indigenous person can prove that their culture is to hunt at night, they would be allowed to hunt at night as well. But the Manitoba Premier believes that it can cause a war between indigenous hunters and non-indigenous hunters. So that's why he has avoided that. And then there is the part of the hunting and fishing where the government can ban it all in a certain area, in the province. And it just kind of can seem unfair because if someone is following the rules, they always do the right things according to the law, and then somebody screws it up for everybody, and then it's gone. It can be very demeaning, especially for indigenous people who, out of the 7 indigenous ways of knowing, through this course that we've learned that they love the land and they need the land for their spiritual needs. And another part about indigenous hunting and fishing I wanted to talk about is the differences between non-indigenous hunting and indigenous hunting. Now, both indigenous people and non-indigenous hunters need an outdoors card to hunt. Non-indigenous people, non-indigenous hunters need this outdoors card so that they can buy separate licenses. It's almost like a base. to buy other licenses where there's limits, no exceptions. Whereas indigenous hunters need this so that they can hunt where they make their own limits, as in their own groups. They make the limits on the amount that they can harvest per year, because sometimes they need that. They are using the land for survival. The next difference between indigenous and non-indigenous hunters is how indigenous hunters can hunt on indigenous land, whereas non-indigenous hunters cannot hunt on indigenous land under no circumstances. Indigenous people, if they would want to buy a license for another piece of land to hunt on, where it is not non-indigenous land, they are allowed to do that if they buy a separate license for it. Now, the fishing rights are also different. The fishing rights are different because indigenous people, they don't need a fishing license unless they are doing it commercially. Whereas non-indigenous people need to buy a license once they're 18 and over. That is some of the differences about indigenous hunting and fishing. There's hopefully, sitting through this, you've learned a little bit about indigenous hunting and fishing rights, how it differs, how it's been changed over the years, and thank you for listening.